I'm Thomas Cox, and we're talking about performance improvement plans, how to get an underperformer up to par or out the door in 90 days without drama, the kind of performance improvement plan that really delivers results. And I wanted to open by explaining a little bit of why I'm so, why I take this so seriously. And I wasn't actually sure myself why it was until like yesterday when I was thinking about it. And I realized that I have Asperger's, and I've over the years used neuroplasticity to get better at things like empathy and understanding like that people's expressions on their faces mean something, and I should look at their faces and so on. But for all of my youth and most of my early career, I was this like technically pretty bright guy who had terrible social skills. And I routinely would get this feedback that is essentially, I'll paraphrase, Thomas, you're doing it wrong. And I'm sure I was. I had no doubt. Like, I never doubted anyone telling me that I was doing it wrong when it came to social things. But what I didn't know was like what right was. And I'm like, okay, okay, I believe you. I'm sure I'm doing it wrong. Any clues, any hints, anything? And the people who are telling me I was doing it wrong, either explicitly or implicitly, almost never could tell me what to do right, just not that, because they learned it implicitly as very young children, and it was all as natural as breathing to them, and they didn't know what they were doing. They were just doing it. And so there was this incredibly maddening feeling I had of being told I was doing it wrong, but not told how to do it right. And that the pain of that has stuck with me. Hey, Sarah. The pain of that has stuck with me. And then when I started working in executive coaching and performance improvement, management consulting, helping people with leadership skills, I saw the same thing happening again with performance improvement plans, where people would tell someone on a performance improvement plan, you're not doing your job correctly. But the PIPs were so vague, it reminded me of my childhood and the incredible pain that the recipient gets of being told you're doing it wrong, but not how to do it right, and the unfairness of it. And that's part of what animates me around this topic today. And it's the same thing, if you want to be in a leadership position, people often don't tell you how to do a better job. And I'm all about getting extremely specific on precisely exactly the nuts and bolts of how to do whatever the thing is you want to do. Okay, so that's my self-revelatory, hopefully not oversharing backstory. And I will talk now with you for the next 40 minutes on performance improvement plans and how you can use a performance improvement plan for your worst performer and do it in such a way that it actually provides lasting improvement for the entire team and not just the one person that maybe inspired you to do this work in the first place. Part of the promise that I made when you signed up is that within 45 minutes, you'll know how to have a PIP process without drama and how to get the person who's targeted with this PIP to actually look forward to it. And I believe by the time I'm done, you'll go, yep, you've done that. And I will outline for you, we won't be able to totally teach every single detail, but you'll see, and I'll give you a sense of what it means to do the three things I recommend that help your whole team for the long term. Even if the person you targeted with a PIP can't match it and ends up having to go away, you've still invested in the entire team. And I'll show you how through my courses and programs, I help people to do this. So a bit about the PIP. What is it that makes most PIPs ineffective or even harmful? This is the picture that illustrates, I think, what it's like for most people to be on the receiving end of a PIP. Is there's somebody yelling at them and they don't know why. Your typical run-of-the-mill performance improvement plan, and I've reviewed many of them, is short-term oriented. It's reactive, right? The performance has been subpar for a while, but no one's gotten around to doing a PIP or even give the worker feedback, or a manager who's struggling, until something happens and, oh my God, we can't let this go on anymore. We got to stop kicking the can down the road. We have to do something now. And so they write something, a plan that's just for the underperformer, and it's poorly written, because how much practice do you really have at this? And it's poorly executed, because what training have you had to put someone on a PIP and see it through? And what's really bad is when the performance plan comes because you've just already decided to fire somebody, and you ask, how do I let this person go? They've been underperforming. And someone says, you got to document it. You have to prove it. you need to put them on a PIP. And so it's like this formality you have to go through before you get to do the thing you wanted to do, which is let them go, which means you're engaging in ass coverage, which means you're really only serving yourself, not them. It's a foregone conclusion. You're going to get rid of them. You just have to go through this little kabuki dance, which is unkind and actually causes problems for the rest of your team. So this typical PIP, this short-term reactive, not well written, not well executed bit of self-serving ass coverage, pardon my language, not only does nothing for the rest of your team, it actually undermines the rest of the team's faith in you as their boss. And then you go to HR, and maybe they give you one of their templates. And these templates are horrible. I've looked at a bunch of them. I've yet to find one that isn't awful, just why I've created my own. They give you vague guidance. They'll say things like, document their performance. Yeah, okay. That's like telling someone to go to Wall Street and buy low and sell high. Oh, is that all there is to it? Yeah, there's a lot more to it, but they don't tell you. What else? Give them feedback. I've trained, in fact, Riyad's been in some of my classes. I've trained managers on how to give feedback. It is not trivial to give people effective performance feedback. And if you don't know how to do it, you will do a bad job. And of course, HR's template says nothing about any of that. Oh, and they'll say things like, does this person communicate well? And I'll explain why that's like a terrible question. And then they'll say, be clear and specific. Really? Like you were just now? Oh, wait, you weren't. And when you get that vague guidance, you end up with a vague PIP. Vague description of performance, incompetent feedback, incompetently delivered. People are treating this whole idea of communication as if it were one thing. And I don't have time to go into it. I actually had to cut the slides for length. I have a whole separate talk I might give in a week or two on the 7 different ways we talk just about the coordination of work. And those become very helpful when you're documenting a PIP. And so the whole PIP is just as vague as the instructions were. And by the way, you'll notice there's no guidance in here on the very important phenomenon of tearing down the team. Now, there's only 2 reasons you would ever put someone on a performance plan. One is they don't do the work. And the other is if they're harming the team performance, team morale, team cohesion. And there's nothing in any of the templates that I've seen that actually even covers that at all. And we'll talk about that. So this is a disaster in the making, is my point. Your traditional run-of-the-mill, the way most people do it most of the time, PIP is awful, right? So you look like you don't understand the role because you're in a hurry. You're just doing this foregone conclusion, bad faith document. And so anyone who looks at it, including coworkers of the person on the PIP, and they may show it around, they often do that. It'll look like you don't understand the role that you're supervising. It'll look like you're focused only on your own agenda, because if you do it this way, you are. It's just about you protecting the company, not you giving this worker a good faith opportunity to not become unemployed, right? Firing someone is inconvenient for the company, but it is catastrophic potentially for the worker. So it's very asymmetric. And when you do this left-hand version, it really looks bad. You're essentially betraying the promise of the PIP as a good faith effort to help the targeted person. And that means other people on the team fear that they might be next. What prevents them from being targeted in this same way? Because there's nothing in here that makes it specific that tells them that they're safe. Because you haven't said, okay, this is good enough, this is not good enough. It's super clear. Anyone looking at this can tell, looking at their own performance, how they're doing. And so you're going to show up as one of 2 things. When you put someone on a PIP, you will look like one of these 2 characters. And think about what it's like to receive a PIP from somebody. So let's shift gears a second. Margie, Adrian, Janine, Riyad, Sarah, and Chris. Think for a moment what it's like to be on the receiving end of some kind of bad performance review / performance improvement plan. I want to get your reaction in the chat, please. Is either you're going to get a PIP from some manager who doesn't know you personally, who is clearly self-serving, who you see no reason to believe they understand your role, and they seem unreliable. And Margie didn't even let me finish. She's already feeling insulted. That's me too. Yes. What else is it like? Sarah, Riyad, Janine, Adrian, Chris, give me a word or a phrase that what would it feel like for you to be told, I'm putting you on a PIP by someone who's coming across like this on the left? Yeah, pointless, says Chris. Yeah, Janine's confused. So would I be. And that's the kind of dynamic that's being created by, yeah, Adrian's confused too. And realizes it makes you feel undervalued. Of course it does. It couldn't do anything else. Okay, now we're going to shift gears. I want you to try on a different emotion. You're still being put on a PIP. You're still being told that your job is at risk. You're still being told there's trouble afoot here, but you're being told by a different manager entirely, somebody who clearly knows you personally in great detail, who has demonstrated selflessness and generosity in the past with you and with your coworkers, a manager who understands your role in great detail and shows it. You can tell. You have no doubt that they absolutely understand the role in great detail. And they've in the past been super reliable, and they've always kept their word to you and to others. Same PIP, you're under the same kind of like threat, but this is the person who's going to oversee your PIP. How are you feeling now? Any different? What's that like? Put yourself in the shoes of the worker. And just a word or a phrase for what it might be like. Yeah, Chris, it still feels like crap, but there's hope. Yeah, makes me feel they're trying to help me to succeed. I feel empowered. You're more open, you're more accepting. And yeah, you're still in trouble, but what are the odds that you might succeed here? One of these is going to fail, and the other one might succeed. And so you'll see that there's things that you can do if you're the person in the manager role, or you're supervising a manager who has to put someone on a PIP. You need to do some work to move them into the right-hand side of this. Yeah, Jeannie's more inclined to try. Okay, now there's a related point. By the way, I picked these bullet points on the two sides here for a very crucial reason. You're going to see them again on the next slide with slightly different language. Now, there's another way in which a traditional PIP does not help. And that is if there is role confusion, if people aren't clear with each other at the work level, the coworkers aren't really super clear on, wait, who's supposed to do what exactly? They think they know, but they've got different stories in their heads. And you don't take the time in the PIP to clear that up. This is how people create trust. This is how trust forms in the brain. We assess our manager, we assess our boss, we assess each other on three basic things: competence, which is very contextual. Can you do the job? Do you understand the job? Integrity, do you keep your word? Are you dependable in that regard? And then benevolence, do you take my side some of the time? Are you at least a little bit generous, a little bit selfless? And you'll just notice that the bad PIP approach fails all three. And what's even worse, I would say, is if you don't take the time to address whether there's role confusion and goal confusion amongst the team members. And I've found that job roles are frequently unclear. The goals are unclear, the roles are unclear. Riyadh and I worked together once upon a time at an organization where this was rampant. I think Riyadh will agree with me. And so the workers couldn't trust each other or their boss. And the PIP could have been used to clarify this, and it wasn't. Or it could be, or you could do it properly by addressing this, which is why, by the way, I'm preparing to release, and because you're on this call, I'm going to give you access to some tools that help with this: documenting roles and responsibilities worksheet, and this Pillars of Trust infographic that you see. I'll send you both of those if you stick around. So this is part of the playing ground here. Another point I want to make: the quality of feedback. We mentioned that feedback is hard to give, that people aren't trained to give feedback. Is the quality of the feedback fuzzy like on the left or clear like on the right? And have you as a manager been trained, or has the manager reporting to you, whom you're helping make a PIP, have they been trained to give clear feedback? I can show you a little bit of what you might do to improve that. But let's look at, I'm going to zoom out and I want to say, what do you need as preconditions to have a truly excellent PIP instead of this horrible sham that is pretty much standard in most places? And I'm going to say that there's four major things you need. And the first is that angel manager at some level, either you become this person or the person you're overseeing in management, it becomes trained to build strong relationships so that there is trust. You're going to need clear definitions of role excellence and the steps to achieve it. A lot of places don't have this. They'll point at their SOPs. The SOPs are terrible. They're almost never what's needed. Clear definition, role excellence, almost always missing in most places. Not that hard to create. You need managers who are trained to give effective feedback. In a minute or two, I'll give you a quick overview of what that might look like. And that's one of the things that I teach. And then you need clear performance measures and thresholds so that anybody, the targeted person or their coworkers, can look at the work standard and say, hey, I'm safe. Or, ooh, I'm borderline. I need to improve. Or, hey, I could be even better. So you'll see that point by point, we're going to go the opposite of a typical PIP. Your strategic PIP, your high-performing PIP, is aimed at the underperformer, yes, but it serves the whole team by clearly documenting excellence for everyone in that role. It provides long-term value because that documentation is going to stick around, whether that person does or not, so everyone knows what excellence is. It's a proactive tool where you create and share these carefully written performance statement for what the role is, the measurements, the thresholds, and the steps required to follow to get to excellence. And it's executed by a manager with strong relationships with the team, and that manager is trained to give feedback that's effective. Now, I would like to have you imagine for just a second that this is you, that you got to put somebody on a PIP, and you're being supported to be the person on the right, where you know exactly how to create this carefully written performance statement, that you're supported to write out the steps. Here's the measure. Here's the threshold. You know exactly what you need to do as a manager to build strong relationships. You may not have time in like a 90-day PIP for one person, but you can start the ball rolling for the rest of the team immediately. And you'll learn how to give feedback that's effective so you can, at the drop of a hat, say, hey, that was great, do more. Or, hey, that right there, that's below standard. I need you to improve next time. Now, thinking about this, which of these feels like the thing that if you had it, you would have greater confidence, you would have greater ability to serve your team the way you'd like to serve them, to be the kind of boss you'd like to be? Did any one of these jump out at you as the thing, oh yeah, that really resonates in my soul? Pick one thing on the right. Where is it the performance threshold? Is it the measurements? Is it the relationship building? Is it the feedback? Is it just being proactive that resonates for you? What is it? Pick something. Strong relationships, says Chris. Thank you, Chris. If it's easier to unmute yourself and speak, that's fine too. I'm good with that. The feedback, says Margie. Yeah, I hear you. Performs the role with the measures, says Rayard. Rayard and I are both engineers at heart. And Adrian and Sarah, any thoughts? And while we're waiting for Adrian and Sarah to answer, let me ask Chris, Margie, and Rayard. Let's suppose, imagine you've got the thing you just typed it. Chris, you absolutely know exactly how to build strong relationships and you're doing it. And Margie, you know exactly how to give feedback in this highly effective way and you're doing it. And Rayard, you've got the performance for the role written out. You've got the measures, the thresholds. It's all clearly documented and everyone understands it and agrees with it. What is that like for you? How are you feeling when you've got that? What does it mean for you? Does it make you a different kind of person? Does it give you a different feeling in your body? Margie feels connected. Yeah. Yeah. We may have lost Adrian. And Chris and Rayard, what is this doing for you to have these additional things? Definitely feels like you can know where to have the improvements. Yeah. As opposed to wishing they would improve or just telling them they're not doing well enough. Like, you want to be useful. You want to help them. And Chris is thinking it's the right word, maybe more confident. Good. Thank you for that. Now, I mentioned tearing down the team. You will almost never see this with your own eyes. You will mostly get complaints from other team members about this, that, oh, so-and-so is gossiping. Make them stop. So-and-so is a bully, but you never see it. So-and-so is doing whatever thing wrong, is making comments that make me uncomfortable. All right. They're almost always unactionable because the reports you're getting aren't actually about behavior. They're vague conclusions or characterizations of behavior, or the person tries to describe the underlying character trait or motivation of the person, which is not only not actionable, it's not even demonstrable. And what you actually, This is a real example, by the way. It's one of my favorite examples of bad PIP language. Your communications with your coworkers have at times been ineffective. What? Can you imagine someone telling you that? What do you even want me to do differently? And I feel sorry for both parties, because clearly the person writing it didn't know how to do a better job. The person reading it certainly doesn't know how to act on that description. Or what if they said, people say you gossip, you need to stop gossiping, but you don't think you do, maybe. Now, if you actually know you're gossiping, okay, great. But how do we know that? Maybe the person thinks what they're doing is perfectly legit. Here's the countermeasure. Use a behavior description worksheet, which calls out the time, the place, the words that were said, the tone of voice, gestures, body language, who else was present, other context. And you give that to each worker. You have them practice on innocuous, safe behavior so they understand how the form works, and say, look, anytime any of us do anything the other ones don't like, can we just write it down so we can talk to each other? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to do stuff that makes you unhappy with me or uncomfortable. And I don't know how, and you may not even ever tell me because you don't know how to tell me. And now I'm inviting you, let's practice with this sheet. And if I or one of your coworkers ever does something that makes you feel not good, I want to know about it. Not that we're going to use this to go beat somebody up, but we can at least have a useful, functional conversation about it. And in support of this, I do have a documenting behavior worksheet, which, because you're here, I'll make sure you get a copy of it. This is the kind of prep work that's needed in order to do a proper PIP that actually moves the ball. Now, I promised you performance documentation. Let me show you what that might look like. For the top 3 to 5 deliverables of any job, whether it's a busboy, a grill cook, a waitress, middle manager, senior vice president of operations, assistant director in charge of Northeast sales. I know Margie's got a handful of people she's working with in IMC. Is it clear what their deliverables are? And so you would lay out all the deliverables, and for each one, you would say, here's an example of not good enough performance. Here's an example of good enough performance. And here's an example of excellent performance. And if you're not sure what to put down for those, it's easy. You wait for people to complain and you say, give me a specific example of what you didn't like. Like, showed up unprepared for the meeting, or he didn't make any sales calls, or he made these sales calls and then didn't get no qualified leads came out of any of it. Or there's something, and you just start extracting that, and that becomes your bad performance. Okay, what would have been good enough, you ask? And then they start giving you examples of that. Hey, what are the superstars doing? Examples of that. So here's one written out so you can see what it might look like. Bussing a table. Bad performance took more than 3 minutes. The tabletop's still smeared, crumbs on the chairs and the floor under the table, and the chairs are out. As opposed to good enough. It takes between 2 and 3 minutes. I made these numbers up. It's been so long since I was a busboy. I don't remember how long it's supposed to take. Sorry. If you're running a restaurant, don't use my numbers. But it's just for illustration, folks. 2 to 3 minutes is good enough. Tabletop is clean. It could be a little damp. No crumbs, no debris, and the chairs are in. And then, but excellent. Excellent is less than 2 minutes. Tabletop clean and dry. No crumbs, no debris, everything from level 2. And the chairs are in and lined up square, and the silverware has been reset. And now your good performers know what excellent is, and they aren't wondering if they're going to get in trouble. They know they're fine because they know they're under 3 minutes, but they also know what could be better. And creating this is non-trivial. I've got a 3-page worksheet on performance. I call this the performance triplet method. Not good enough and great. And it walked you through how to create these. Is this making sense so far? Are folks getting a sense that some of these things might be helpful for you? Yeah, I got a thumbs up from Chris, and Margie's got a very small smile and she's nodding ever so slightly. Yes, definitely, says Rayard. Okay, good. Now, here's the thing on feedback. And Margie said this was her interest, and all of you should know this. And I won't have time to teach you because this actually has to be something that you practice again and again. When I teach this to people through my course offerings, it's at least 4 weeks of weekly coursework with daily practice in between. And I think Rayard might have sat through one of those trainings. And so the Center for Creative Leadership has a model that's almost correct. They use situation, behavior, impact. And that's not quite it. In my opinion, it's situation. Hey, when you whatever the situation is, and then the behavior, and you behave in a certain way, then there's an impact, situation, behavior, impact. And what happens is, and then you need to have a request, because if you just tell them what the impact is and you don't make a request, that's not feedback. And if you give a request, can I count on you to, okay, now I can't tell you how many times people have complained to me, well, so-and-so did this thing. And we said, well, did you ask him not to? Well, no. Okay. Guess what? We didn't hire psychic people. So here's an example. Hey, Fred, when you're coming to a meeting and you arrive late and unprepared. So there's the situation, behavior. You're coming to a meeting, you arrive late and unprepared. What happens is it disrupts the meeting and you come across as unprofessional. Now, that's not the only way you could have said it. You might say it very differently, but there's something that's true for you that you could say. Can I count on you to show up on time and prepared in the future? A lot of people get this wrong. They want to talk about the past, like, why were you late? Who cares? If they could travel through time, they wouldn't use that power to go be on time to your meeting. They would use it to go back 10 or 20 years and buy Bitcoin for 10 cents, okay? Time travel is not an option, so don't talk like it is. Feedback is always about the future. And you get them to say, sure, I'll do better next time. And if they want to talk about, I can't show up because of blah, blah, and then, okay, now you're getting into coaching conversation, different skill, but feedback is where you ask for what you want so they do better next time. Hey, when you're bussing a table and you don't push in the chairs, it makes for a sloppy look and the waitresses have to do it for you. Can I count on you to push the chairs in next time? You see how clear that is? That's the formula. Now, this only works when you practice it enough times that you can do it fluidly without thinking, which means the best advice I've ever seen on this is start with your top performers and only give positive feedback using this formula. They love it. Like, your top people need to know that they're doing the right things the right way. How many of you worked for someone and you thought you were doing things the right way, but you wished your boss would have been a little clearer? I think we've all had that. Yeah, I wouldn't mind a little more positive feedback from the boss to know that I'm dialed in. Okay, guess what? The people who report to you, they feel just like you did. And by the way, if you need to give negative feedback before you're really fluid, take notes and use a worksheet. And I'm not going to provide you with that because that's not appropriate for a free tool. That has to be real hands-on training, in my opinion. Okay, now one of the promises I made is that you would get through the PIP without drama. And here's my approach to this. And I've used this or substantially similar approaches in the past. I want you to feel into this, not just analyze it intellectually, but also feel what this would be like both to give and to receive. I suggest starting with an apology. Now, the lawyers and the HR people are freaking out in this moment. Not so fast. The apology is not, it's all us and not you, but there should be, I believe, some responsibility taken by the company. In a perfect world, I would say, you would have been given all the training and tools and feedback you need to perform with excellence, and you're not performing to the standard that we need. And I think this might be at least partly our fault, and this PIP is intended to fix that. Now, before I say anything else, again, you're going to put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving this. Margie, Sarah, Chris, Janine, Rayard. You're not liking being on a PIP. You don't like this like sledgehammer coming at you that in 60 or 90 days you might lose your job. And this person is saying, look, you're not performing at the standard we need. This might be partly our fault. The PIP's intended to fix it. How's this feeling so far? Let me give you one more paragraph and you tell me how it feels. The PIP is going to lay out all the skills you need to have and the performance level you need to meet so we can keep you here. Makes one open to the feedback. I agree, Rayard. Yep. Margie says, all good. Chris and Sarah, love to hear from you. And while you're typing, I want to add, you're going to say a little bit more. You're going to say, look, it's possible you lack some internal trader capability. Some jobs, oh, Rayard said you disarms defensive mode of the PIP. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And that's the idea. We don't want them defensive. We want them engaged. We want them to say, yes, please, let's do this. So you want to say, look, it's possible you lack some internal trait. And some jobs require 20/20 vision. We should have screened you when we hired you to ensure you had every trait needed for success. Another possibility, I didn't put in here, but you might need to, is that the job might have changed over time. Like the jobs change over time. And maybe now we're requiring some skill that we didn't require when we first hired you, and we didn't rescreen you. It's possible we missed something. We're going to fix that. And if you lack some needed trait that can't be learned, like 20/20 vision, I can't teach that to you. Perfect pitch hearing, I can't teach that. If it's necessary, some skills necessary, you don't have it. Okay, we need to know that. So we know it's not from lack of trying on your part, and we'll try to find you another role. We still can't keep you in a role for which you're not fit. But at the very worst, we'd say, look, we had to let him go, not because he wasn't a willing worker, but because the job shifted. We needed 20/20 vision, and his corrected vision was 20/40, and he just wasn't able to keep the error rate down. Otherwise, good reviews, but couldn't keep him. Like, that's a very different letting go than fired for cause. And it's going to be different psychologically. Now, you notice I'm not proposing you keep the person on if they can't do the job. But we're going to give them a fair shake. And this is taking away the drama of the encounter. The company's taking responsibility. You as the manager taking as much responsibility as is appropriate for you to take. Remember, we're responsible to people, not for them. They still have to show up and do the work. And you're going to want to get your exact wording here cleared through HR and legal. Don't just copy and paste my language, because different states or different legal regimes are different. But I would start with something in writing and then ask HR and legal to improve it without gutting it, so that you don't create problems for the organization. But do start with some form of apology, some form of responsibility sharing, right? Because a bad PIP just blames the worker, and that's almost never fair. Okay, so I'm ready to wrap up. We're about 8 minutes early, so I have some time for some Q&A. I'm happy to stay on as long as you guys want to stick around for Q&A. But I want to check in and see what might be next for you. And specifically, what I want to know is whether you're willing to make a commitment to yourself to do whatever your right next thing is. It doesn't have to be anything to do with me, but I want you to not be in the old PIP universe and the old PIP mentality and engaging in the old PIP practices. I want you to do it this vastly improved way. So I invite you to do 3 things. I'm going to ask you to type. I want you to do 3 things. The first one is just pick one thing of all the things I've talked about. I know you picked one earlier, but you might have changed. Of all the things I've talked about, is it the role descriptions? Is it the feedback? Is it the strong relationships? Is it clear measures and thresholds? Is it the apology? Anything. The one thing that stands out in your mind is the thing that you would like for you, that you think would make a difference for you. And just type that in. Or you can say it. What's the one thing? I know for me, it was the describing behavior worksheet, actually. That's the one that filled an important gap for me. Oh, for Chris, adding the request to the feedback. Isn't that funny how simple that is? We are definitely going to use and implement the apology as already analytical and measurement oriented. It's true, which you are. I don't know if you guys don't know, but Riard is a master at analysis. So for Chris, it's the request and feedback. For Riard, it's the whole package. And Margie is writing something perhaps lengthy.
Can I speak? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Just say it out loud. It's fine.
Yeah.
This is small enough for everything.
I put it all together. I think for me, what would be my approach is to be with it as it is. That's what I'm having a hard time writing. So it's easy.
Yeah.
So here's a situation.
Yeah.
No negativity, just no judgment, just describe what is and how we're going to fix it by going forward. So with no judgment per se, but let's go forward. And
it's the difference between negative judgment versus blameless discernment.
Yeah, just what is. This is where we're at.
Neither of us wants to be here, and yet here we are. Whatever shall we do about it? Let's make things better. Yeah, absolutely. I love that vibe from you, Margie. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay. Now I want you to visualize that being true for you. And I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you're going to take action, whatever the right action is for you. And if you're willing to commit to take action for yourself, just type, yes, I will commit, or the letter Y, anything. I want to see you say and do. You can say it out loud if you like, Margie. You're unmuted. Margie's a yes. And Dolores will have to watch the replay. Chris is a yes. Thank you, Chris.
Say yes with a smile.
Unfortunate, Riard had to do a PIP to downgrade an underperforming senior manager, and he resigned. Oh, so painful. I'm so sorry, Riard. Look, I got this thing out to you as quick as I could. I'm sorry it wasn't sooner. I'm glad. Okay, looks like we've got some commitments to action. I'd like to offer you, is it okay if I tell you guys what I can do to help you on your journey? I've mentioned a number of free tools. They're not all completely done. I've got like one thing left to do. The whole rules and goals thing. I'm going to finish that off over the weekend, but I'll be able to have all the free tools that I mentioned in this presentation available. And if you can join the wait list today and get those as soon as they come out, they'll be out definitely by the end of the month. You can get that. Just go to thepipguy.com and ask for the free tools.
Nice, very nice job, Tom.
Thank you, Margie. That means a lot coming from you. I know you're someone that I admire.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll see you soon.
Awesome, Margie. Take care.
I think so. Bye.
That's right. Rayard, yeah. Got some value, it sounds like. Super. Would love to have you take advantage of that. And then, Rayard, I love you so much. Your content is literally life-changing. See, that's what I want to do. That's exactly what I want to do. So I want to help somebody else not suffer some of the things that you and I and others have suffered. It's avoidable suffering is this terrible thing. And I think that this is my ability. This is my way of contributing. That's right. Some of you don't know, Rayard and I worked together originally 4 years ago, and he's a brilliant guy, but I didn't know a few things he didn't. And he's an excellent student. And he's been using some of my leadership training tricks and tips for the last 4 years. I need to get you to write a review for me on Google, Rayard. Maybe a LinkedIn testimonial or something, because I'm glad you're happy, and I want to. All right, you got it, man. You got it. Anytime, he says. Super. So Sarah, Chris, Dolores, if there's anything I can do to answer a question, I'm here. Let me know. And if it's easier to type your questions, if you'd like to come off of mute and speak, you can do that.
I was wondering about the slide you had where you were talking about the apology slide it was, I think. Maybe so it started off good on the left side, and then on the right side I thought, so on the left side you had, okay, maybe the company hasn't given you enough and whatever. And it was like, okay, it's not me. And then on the right side, it was like, oh,
maybe it is you.
Your traits are not good enough. That's what I read out of
We don't know.
You're right? Naturally not made for this. And that's where I thought, oh, now that stings.
Now, by the way, if you don't have to say both things, if you believe in your heart the person has all the traits they need, you can leave that out. Or you can leave it in and say, look, I'm going to read this out loud because it is possible. But I'll tell you, just between you and me, I think you've got everything you need to succeed. We just got to give you the step-by-step instructions, the training, and the support that you need. And so the idea is not to discourage them, but it's also not to give them false hope. Because the truth is, there was a guy, gosh, he was hired into QA in a warehouse, and his eyesight was so bad he couldn't read the labels. And I don't know why. Was he someone's brother-in-law? Like, how did he get this job? But you need to use discernment on whether or not you want to use these things on the right, Chris. Because the idea is not to deflate them, but it's also not to give them false hope. If you think that they might be missing a trait, I would encourage you to include it. If you're completely confident that they've got all the traits that they need, the untrainable things like dexterity or flexibility. If you're a dance instructor, you got to be able to dance. If you're a flight instructor, you got to be able to fly a plane, which is learnable. And you got to have a certain amount of eyesight, which is a trait, right? Yeah. And I totally get you, Chris. I'm removing drama, but I'm not removing reality here. And the truth is, there's some jobs that some people are not cut out for. And we have to make sure that if we didn't screen you properly before we screen you now, And if the traits required for the job have shifted over time, you used to be screened for it, but we haven't rescreened you recently, we might need to do it. Because that's just the truth. And yes, it might feel discouraging to hear that. But yeah, please, Chris, use your discernment. If you think the person's perfectly well suited for the role and just needs more training and support and clear role definition and clear definition of what's good and bad and clear feedback, tell them that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is kind. Brene Brown says that clear is kind. And false hope is not kindness. And so if there's any question as to whether or not this person has the inborn traits needed, like we don't lower the bar to keep somebody in a role that they can't perform well in. That's not fair to them or the company or the other workers who have to work extra hard to backfill the person who really can't do the job and shouldn't be here in the first place.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit easier for like hard physical requirements.
Yeah.
It gets like into a gray zone with sort of soft skills. I don't know, empathy or
empathy can
whatever.
be trained. Empathy can be trained. I am living proof of this.
But I mean, judging whether that trait is there or not, I think when it comes to soft skills, it's risky to make a statement like that.
I wouldn't look at my examples, Chris. Perfect pitch hearing and 20/20 vision. Nothing soft.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that's where my brain went, to be honest, when I was thinking
Fair
about
enough. This. And if I was working with you on something specific, Chris, I might say things like empathy, I believe can be trained. You could say that out loud to them. There might be a level of empathy that's needed that you're not currently bringing to the job, and that can be trained. I'll show you how to do that. It's one of my, I actually once taught a class called Empathy Exercises for Engineers. And I offered it to the Project Management Institute of Portland at their annual convention. And it was standing room only in that room. They gave me the biggest room. They told me later that not only had I gotten the highest ratings of any session that year, I'd actually come in with the highest ratings they'd ever recorded since they started recording numbers in, I think, 20 years. So there's appetite for this. People want to get better at things like empathy. Engineers want to get better at it if you show them how, which is one of the reasons I do the work I do. I love it so much. Any other questions? I don't want to keep folks too much longer. We're 7 minutes past when I said I would be done. So I'm happy to wrap up.